Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and glad you could make it this evening. This is going to be, as I've mentioned over the last day or so, this is going to be the last show for 2016. I'm going to be winding down for the holidays coming up in just a few weeks, and then we'll start the show back up in January. But thank you for joining me live this Thursday, December 8th. And as I've always mentioned on the shows at the beginning, I've got a great show for you. I've got two of my favorites that come on the Coach's Corner panel, John Hughes and Pete Buchanan, who I'll bring on here in just a moment. And a little bit later in the show, I'm going to be joined by Byron Casper. Brandon Stooksbury was going to be joining me the second half of the show as well, but unfortunately something came up last minute, so he's not going to be on the show this evening. But Byron Casper and possibly another gentleman is going to be joining us a little bit later on, so make sure you stay tuned for the second half of the broadcast tonight. But as always, we're live Thursdays, unless otherwise stated, from 6 to 8 p.m. Central, and that's 7 to 9 Eastern Time for those of you on the East Coast. And quickest way to find the show is go to blogtalkradio.com and type up in the search key Golf Talk Live, and that will take you to the live broadcast on Thursdays. And for some reason, if you can't join us live, just go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live and just scroll down, and you will see the on-demand section. And that has all of the shows, of course, that are archived and recorded previously. So you can get us either way, live or the archive version, whatever works for your convenience. And don't forget to go to Stitcher.com or iTunes.com. It's also available on those two networks as well as podcasts. So make sure that you do that. Always would love to hear from you guys and get some feedback during the live broadcast. The number to call in is area code 646-716-4667. Or you can email questions or comments to me personally at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And, of course, I update on all social media. Facebook, of course, the show is updated every week on that, as well as Twitter. My Twitter handle is TedandBuck, CEO. And CEO, of course, is in capital letters. But, again, thank you for joining me live tonight. And we're going to have, because it's the last show of the year, we're going to kind of have some light conversation. We're going to talk about a few key things that I want to bring to the guys' attention. But let me introduce my two good friends that are coming on the show tonight, starting off with John Hughes. Of course, he's a PGA Master Professional here in the Florida area, and he's also the Vice President of the North Florida PGA Section, and he was the recipient of the 2013 PGA of America Horton Smith Award. And he's also ranked in as one of the top 30 instructors in Golf Tips magazine, so make sure you check him out there as well. And also joining the panel is on Coach's Corner tonight is Pete Buchanan. He's been on the show many times as well, and one of my favorites. He's the founder and director of instruction and owner of Plain Simple Golf LLC, which of course we've mentioned before houses the Plain Simple Golf circuit and Simple Swing repeater training brace. And he's got well over 30 years of teaching experience as well. And we're going to talk to you tonight and see if we can help a few of you last-minute golfers before you wind up for the end of the season. Guys, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Ted. Thanks.
All right, appreciate it. And as always, guys, I know we're getting ready to jump into the holidays here in just a few weeks, so everybody's got Christmas on their mind and trying to get some last-minute things ready for that. And obviously we've got other projects that we're trying to get finished off before the year closes out as well. So I know everybody's busy, and as I've said many times before, guys, I really appreciate you guys giving of your time and coming on here. I know it's not always easy. I want to ask just a few questions, and then we'll kind of just have some light conversation tonight, as I said, on the panel discussion. But and Pete, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. I want to kind of get into the heads of golfers, if you will. and whether they're playing a club championship or whether they're a little bit more assertive and maybe playing on a mini tour somewhere. What's a player's mindset, do you think, coming into a tournament? What are most players thinking about when they're coming in? Obviously, they want to win, but what's some of the things that they do mentally to prepare for an upcoming tournament, and what should they, for some of our amateur golfers, maybe playing in their club championship? What are some things that they might want to think about before they're as they're getting ready for the tournament?
Well, I think first and foremost, I'm pretty sure they're hopeful they're going to play well. I think everybody looks forward to playing well in a tournament. I would hope that the golf course they're playing, they've had a chance to look at it. They've had a chance to go through the holes and set forth a game plan as to, how they're going to play it, know where their strengths and weaknesses fit the different holes that they're going to play, understanding their game as they're coming into it, what shots they're performing well, which shots they're not performing well. And I always tell the guys, I don't want you to play negative golf, but, if there's a shot you're not performing very well and you can avoid it, just avoid it. We always try to get all the shots going, but, different times of the year you play different. But just a good, positive mental outlook, a way to look at, the golf course in its entirety and how you're going to play. I always think a game plan is always the best way to do it. And then just making sure that, as you've led up to it, that you've prepared, you practice, a lot of the short shots. Those are under control. You know what's going on. And above all, just making sure that you're going in with a good positive attitude and looking forward to going in and putting on a good show.
Well said. John, let me just ask this and just reframe it just a little bit different, or maybe just one-sided for a second, and then I'll let you answer in its entirety. But I want to focus on particularly some of those that maybe play in their local club championship. They're playing their course very regularly, so they know that the course conditions and that. If you were working with a member of a club and they came to you, John, and said, okay, I've got the club championship coming up in a month or so's time. I could really use some help refining my game and that. What advice would you give them based on my earlier question, and what would you do to help them prepare for that championship?
Well, it's no different for the average person versus the professional player or the one person aspiring to be a tour player. The difference in how you prep is the time commitment involved. What Pete said, I'd probably take everything that he's saying and just put it into the context of what the average person could do within a time frame. Coming a month ahead of time, so long as you're committing some days each week prior to that club championship or the member or whatever it happens to be, you're well ahead of the ball game so long as you're staying mentioned. A lot of on-course, believe it or not, most people want to fix their swing, become better ball strikers, right. And it's not necessarily the case based on the amount of time you have versus, say, an aspiring tour professional. That's what they do for a living, 8 hours a day, so they've got more time to make swing changes, where the average person, if you worked more on your short game from a technical standpoint of view, from a simulated standpoint of view, with practice rounds, games you could play at the practice facility, playing more practice rounds, just making smarter decisions based on what your capabilities are. Most likely you're going to play at that same relevant level that a aspiring tour player would, the difference being that time commitment. Yours is yours and theirs is basically just swap jobs, and that's really the difference. They're doing it for a living, you're not. Right.
Well said, again, John. Thank you. Just to sort of keep on this theme for just a second, I want to ask, I guess, sort of a follow-up question. Is there a particular area of, is it maybe a good idea for them to focus on, again, like John, as you just pointed out, you're not going to want to incorporate, especially when you've maybe only got a month out from that championship, incorporate any major swing changes or things like that, even if they are having some difficulties in a certain area, because you don't want to mess them up before they go in there. But is it a good idea for them to maybe really focus on their strengths if they're maybe a good short game player or, are able to, put the ball in play a lot of the times? Is it better for them to focus on their strengths and worry about the changes maybe after the tournament? What do you think about that? And that, John, I'm going to let you go on that.
Well, obviously you always try to play to your strengths regardless of your skill level. Your strengths are only as good as those things you're average at, and the things you're average at are only as good as the things that you're going to be somewhat deficient with. So it's maintaining the strengths, really, as you're prepping. It's all about maintaining those. What a lot of people do is focus so much on a deficiency that they forget about the things they're average with, and they just assume that what they're good at will just stay there, but they don't take the time to maintain it. So it's a balancing act. It's somewhat simple for some, not so simple for others. But so long as you're maintaining that balance of, hey, here's my strength, I know what it is, and I'm playing to it, and you're just trying to bring the deficiencies up a little bit, maintain the average things you do, those little puzzle pieces fit in together nicely, you're going to have a good tournament so long as you're making good decisions. When you focus too hard, especially with not a whole lot of time involved to make a swing change, as Pete could attest, there's probably players he and I both work with on an individual basis that even with 6-8 hours a day of committed time, it takes 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 weeks for this swing change, quote unquote, to repeat itself in the heat of battle. And that's truly the case. It's not about fixing it. It's got to be time tested, warrior tested. So when you're in that heat of the moment, it's going to repeat for you. Right.
Yeah, I agree exactly with that. Pete, let me ask you something, and again, sort of staying on this theme for a second. Yeah, this past weekend, of course, we watched Tiger come back in his tournament in the Bahamas, and a little slow to the gate on the first round, but came back and shot a 65, and then I believe a 70. And I didn't get the final round, so I'm not sure. But I know he was certainly up in the leaderboard throughout the tournament, considering this is really his first main tournament that he's been back in and playing for a while. If you were to and I know it's difficult, we can't get into Tiger's head, but what do you think that is going through his head at this point, knowing that he has not been playing for at least 16 months competitive golf? What do you think is going through his head at this point? What do you think he's focusing on, or what, in your opinion, do you think he should be focusing on?
Well, if I know Tiger, he was probably trying to win. I mean, that's the way he is. I mean,
Sure.
He isn't going to anything unless he thinks he can win it. But he made 24 birdies. If I'm not mistaken, he led the tournament in the number of birdies. So his ability to make shots and make putts is still in there. The only problem is I think he made 4 doubles, so that doesn't help. But, I think his mindset was probably, I'm just glad to be back out here. I mean, he made one quick, when they asked him what his goal was, he said he wanted to break into the top 1,000, which I thought was hilarious, in the rankings. So, but no, I think he probably had the exact mindset that he needed. I mean, if there's nobody, maybe aside from Nicklaus, that's more mentally prepared to play golf than Tiger is. So I'm sure based on what he was doing, based on knowing his game, I'm sure he came in with the expectation to play as well as possible, and knowing that, there's going to be some rust that needs to be knocked off. It's different when you're up and playing 4 days in a row in that atmosphere. But, I think anything different, it would be hard to double guess Tiger Woods. He's been at the top and he knows himself better than anybody. I know that looking on some of the Facebook stuff, everybody's tearing his swing upside down and sideways, trying to say how they'd make it better. But that just comes with the territory. But he made a ton of birdies. So if I was the rest of the guys out there, I'd be saying, "Oh, look out! Here he comes."
Yeah, I agree with that. And John, what about you? What was your thought? I mean, I certainly didn't get to see the whole tournament, but I did watch a good amount of it. And I'll have to be honest, of all the times that, and when I say came back, because Tiger has certainly made a number of attempts over the last several years of, getting back into competitive golf, and he would, kind of get in there, but just, ran into some issues with his back and so forth. But I had to be honest, I was actually very impressed with his play this past weekend. I thought he looked really good, and as Pete pointed, it's to be expected. He's got to knock some of the rust off. It's been a while since he's played, competitive tournament golf at this level, and by his own admission, he realized it's going to be a journey getting back on. But I think he looked good out there, and as Pete just pointed out, I also agree. I think that the other players are going to say, well, let's see what's going to happen. But yeah, look out. What were your thoughts if you had a chance to watch much of the tournament with Tiger's comeback here?
I didn't get to watch much of it. I was mainly highlighting and newsreels and that type of thing due to other commitments. But a couple of things that came to my mind was 15, 16 months off. Hopefully he is well healed. And it certainly looked like it was. And that makes a big difference in anyone's performance. I don't care what sport it is, even chess. If you're well healed, you're going to make good moves in chess. He is a chess player on the golf course, and we did see that. The rust, those are the bogeys, the double bogeys that Pete was mentioning. But I think the real interesting thing was how he's gone about re-entering the game is the way I'm going to phrase it. It's very similar to how we enter the game. Let's just play some tournaments that are very friendly to my game as far as the course goes, very friendly as far as the field. Let me build a little bit of confidence in what I'm doing, and let's get the game back to where it was and take a very logical, very strategic approach to it. It's just not, hey, he played 4 good rounds and he scored and made 24 birdies. I think this is part of the overall plan, similar to him in the late 90s joining the tour. It was very strategic. He was on a fast track then and was 20-plus years younger. So taking that into consideration, I think what you saw was his preparation to get back into Augusta. If he gets some sponsor exempts or tournament exempts into the other majors and some of the other big tournaments through the various ways that he has, I think that's what you're seeing. Honestly, it's one thing to perform, but as Pete said, he's there to win. I don't doubt he was there to win this week, but I think he's got his eyes set on bigger prizes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What was kind of, and just a final note on Tiger, and then we'll move on. What was kind of interesting, and I was really surprised to hear this, but and I don't recall the announcer that said this, but and I'm sort of paraphrasing here, but they made the comment that, to be honest, that they were kind of tired of a lot of the critics. And Pete, you'd mentioned about, obviously everybody on Facebook and other social media, going on the swing and other areas of Tiger's game. But this particular announcer actually came right out during the tournament and made the comment about, a lot of the critics needed to kind of just, move on and kind of get over it. And I have to agree with that. It's always great to see a player do well, and players sometimes, for whatever reason, whether it's because of personal issues or physical issues, struggle with their game or have to step away from the game, if you will, for a while. And obviously Tiger's had to do that for a multitude of reasons. But I'm just glad to see, for one, I'm glad to see him back. I hope he does well. And, whether he, beats at this point, whether he beats Nicklaus's, record of majors or just gets out there and has some fun and gives it his best, I'm happy for him. I hope he does well, and I think he will. And unless either one of you have another comment or two, we'll move on, okay?
Well, just with that, watching some of the telecast, he was having fun out there. He was laughing and horsing around with the guys, and that's a totally different, Tiger Woods that you're seeing. And I think that in itself shows that he's comfortable with where he is. Yeah, I agree. The other thing, too, and I know I said that was the last point a minute ago, but I'm going to make one more because you brought one to light. Two things that I would make note of. Number one, I noticed that he had slimmed down a little bit. He's not quite as bulked up. Certainly he looks fit.
and I don't know whether that was intentional or just a byproduct of maybe some different fitness routines that he's working through now in lieu of his back issues. But he looked in good shape, but he looked a little slimmer than what I've seen him. But you're right. I think what I noticed this time with him coming out and playing, as opposed to a few years ago when he was sort of re-entering, as John put it, into the game, there just looks to be a more upbeat attitude in his personality, and I think that's going to serve him well. I think he, not just the physical part, but I think mentally, I think he's ready to come back in, and I think maybe earlier attempts he wasn't quite mentally there. He might have thought he was, but I'm only guessing, of course, but that was the impression I got. But anyways, I want to talk, and I know we've touched on some of these before, guys, but I just thought, as I said, this is the last show of the year. It'd be kind of fun just to get some thoughts in people's mind as they get ready for the holidays. But I want to talk about, and it's not just applicable, of course, to the majors, but everybody gets on the green, and sometimes you're dealing with some fast greens. So John, I'm going to jump to you here first on this one. But is there a special technique that you've uncovered or that you try to instill in your students when they're faced with some fast greens? What's the way to best handle those?
I would, quite honestly, I recommend to all my clientele, regardless of skill level, that it's probably in your benefit to learn to putt fast greens because it's easier to adjust to the slow ones. Most people, as you're indicating, when they get on fast greens, they're all freaked out. They don't know how to accelerate the putter through the zone, even though that's what it requires. They're decelerating. So there's multiple times that if the greens are slow where I am, I may bring them, say, into the cart barn and putt on cement, believe it or not.
Yeah, right.
The faster the green, the more control you're going to learn of your stroke and of yourself and of your distance control. So when you're faced with something fast and you've trained on something fast, it shouldn't be a surprise to you. From the going the opposite way, going slower, there's multiple things you can do to hit putts longer. I know there was a course, I'm not going to name the course, but I went from bent grass greens at a private club averaging 11 to 12 daily on the stimp meter to a private club in a different region of South Carolina that was Bermuda, and a different clientele, which was over 55 years old, and it rolled at 6. And it threw me for a loop for quite a while. And I tried everything, and I had to really think about this, and I made it much simpler for myself after a couple months. I bought a heavy putter. I bought a heavier putter than I did because what I was finding is I was jeopardizing my stroke by trying to hit it harder, hit it firmer. And then when I'd go visit the people on the fast greens, I was all screwed up. So I think what you're really trying to do is no matter what the speed is, find a stroke that you can be comfortable with, you can maintain, preferably, in my opinion, on faster greens, to where when you go to slower greens, you can go to a little bit heavier putter if your swing's getting too big. The bigger the swing gets, the more likelihood of error. As far as that goes, you can maybe put a little bit more weight on the front foot to help the acceleration of your putter. There's probably, again, bottom line is that putter's got to accelerate through the hitting zone. And if you're training that way with faster greens, it's easier to understand on a slower green how that acceleration works, where most amateurs, most weekend warriors, when they go from slow to fast, they've got no clue how to accelerate that putter. They're actually doing the opposite, and that's where they're prone to errors come into play.
Right. Yeah. And putting is really such a personal thing. I think it's different than really any other part of the game because, as we've seen over the years, you look how Nicklaus putted, he had a very open stance, he had his left foot drawn back, and he kind of almost got his eye behind the ball as opposed to really over it, just to kind of see that line. And, of course, keeping his hips and whatnot open allowed him to, as you said, John, to sort of accelerate through and make sure he got the club face through. Pete, as far, and without obviously getting repetitive here, there is a lot of, I think the putter is next to the driver is probably the other a piece of equipment that there's so many variations out there. You've got your blades, your mallets, and others. Is there a product out there, and I don't necessarily mean from a manufacturer, but a style of putter out there that you found personally that works or is conducive on faster greens that you found more successful with, that or feedback from your students? Is that something that makes a difference? The equipment?
Well, I think it can. First of all, for me, from a putter, when I set it down, it has to be something that looks good to me, but also something that I can set down square. It's really important, and I don't really care what the putter looks like, but I need to be able to set it down square to the line I'm looking at. And as long as I can do that, I'm pretty good with how the putter's set up. I think lie angle is critical in getting the right lie of the putter so it sits relative to the ground the right way. John made some great comments on different weights of putters on different speeds of greens, and that can make a big difference for sure. I think the setup of the putter is really critical. As funny as it may seem, you need to learn how to roll the ball properly. And people think that's funny sometimes when I say that, but if you're not rolling the ball properly, you're never going to be a good distance putter. And so you're going to struggle on the greens. So you have to learn how to roll it, and the right fit of a putter can help that tremendously. So, I think the equipment is really a big deal in putting. We all see it. I mean, somebody gets to the driving range and they hit 50 drives for the pleasure of 2 and drive past the putting green and go tee off and wonder why they can't putt. They just avoid it like crazy when it's, probably one of the things that's going to save their game more than anything else. I was talking to a team that I volunteer coach with, and I told them, I said, you got to be a genius on the greens. That has to be, where you're going to be, because that's going to make up a ton of stuff that doesn't go well, in other places. And when you're playing well, when you're good on the greens, your score is great. When you're not playing well, when you're good on the greens, you can still score. So, I think putting and having the right fit of a putter. If there was one club in my bag that I would have a fitting session with, it would be the putter.
Yeah, and I agree with that. What's very interesting, and it's kind of ironic, really, when you think about it. Most of your scoring opportunities, of course, happens on the putting green. I mean, you can certainly chip in, and obviously you want to have a tight short game beside. But it's interesting that more often than not, now obviously some of the older golfers or more senior golfers, I think, have kind of figured this out. It's like anything, I think, with experience and age. But John raised a very interesting point, and I want to get your thoughts on this with his experience of playing, 2 different courses, one, having very fast greens and then one being much slower. What can a player really do in a case like that? Obviously, John's a seasoned veteran of the game, and even he was a little bit baffled. So you get some of these amateurs out there that maybe are playing different courses, and you're going virtually from one extreme to the other. How do you react to something like that? Because it's going to take a few holes to kind of readjust. How do you prepare for something like that, Pete?
Even when you're just playing, any type of round of golf you're playing, you have to have a plan when you're going into it. And spending time on that green before you go out to play is important, because you're going to be able to get a sense of what the speed of the greens are like. And so you should spend some time on the putting green. I just had a session. I told you I was out working with some of my players, and when we went to putting, and they were asking me, what do you do before you play? I said, I make sure I never putt to a hole. All I'm trying to do is figure out how fast the green is. And once I look at a hole, then everything's about put it in the hole. So I would run through some drills, some distance drills, and just work on, how hard am I going to hit it to go this far? And that can be a big, big plus. And I know some people say, well, the practice green may not be the same speed as the greens on the course. Well, it's better than nothing. So you need to get a good feel for those greens when you get there. And I would highly recommend that, part of your warm-up routine is doing some distance drills on that green before you take off, so you have an idea what the speed is.
Right, exactly. And John, I want to go to another question, unless you have any other thoughts you want to add to that part of the discussion.
No, I agree with Pete. It is about a plan going to the green prior to it. I can't name names here, but I've got a client years ago that said they just rushed to the golf course and it would take 13 holes, and this person in their regular life is nicknamed Mr. Prepared. And I said, well, why don't you take some time on the green and just figure the speed out? He didn't want it to be work. I'm like, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be work. It takes 4, 5, 6 putts. That's it. Whether you're putting to a hole or not. Pete brings up a great point. If you're trying to judge the speed, then focus on speed. But as soon as you get the speed, you got to get target-oriented because that's what the game's about. But it turns out this gentleman goes out, just spends 4, 5, 6 putts figuring out the distance, and lo and behold, even though he's still Mr. Speedy Gonzalez getting to the golf course, playing better, just simply due to getting distance control down. That's really the key. And I watch so many amateurs where I am. They hit a ton of balls, bypass the green. The green's on the way to the first tee. They have to walk by it or drive by it. And so few people go there. Then they wonder why their scores are like they are. Well, they were taking stats of their putting, I guarantee you, they're 3-putting 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 times around because they don't have the speed down.
Right. And, the other thing, too, and John, you just really made an excellent point here, is, most golfers heading out to their rounds go and hit balls on the range. And, certainly some will go to the putting green and if they've got time. But I think what a lot of it is, I think psychologically the reason why a lot of golfers do that is they don't want to they want to make sure they're hitting it decent. They don't want to get up to that first tee and, duck hook it or slice it or whatever the, shape shot that they've got. They don't want to look foolish, but yet they spend little or no time on the putting green or chipping, on the greens. So, they might hit a great drive, but then once they get up to the green, they're still bogeying or double or even triple bogeying because they haven't worked on the other assets, of the game because they're too focused on trying to hit the perfect shot out, off the tee, and that's just the wrong way to really focus things. John, I want to stick with you for just a second, just on this next question. What do you do in a case, and I'm sure you've had many players mention this to you, if a course or several holes on the course just don't fit your eye? How do you handle those holes? There's always going to be, Nicholas talked famously about that, that certain courses just didn't fit his eye, and, he went out and played obviously his game. But what do you do, or how do you advise or coach a player that's maybe going to play a course or two in their life where they're just not going to, it's just not going to fit their eye?
I've had that come up a couple of times in the past month with clients that came in for extended golf schools where we're playing a golf course and within a couple of holes they're saying, wow, this is a tougher course than I'm used to, or there's a lot of right to left, so I don't hit the ball right to left, or vice versa. What I try to have them do is understand the golf course and how the architect literally lays out a golf course, which is backwards. A lot of people don't realize this. I've gotten this information from numerous architects throughout my career. They're looking for fantastic green complex areas based on the land use plot that the owner of the golf course has. They're finding best places to put irrigation, drainage, that kind of thing. And then once they figure out where the greens go, then they're going to route the golf course and go backwards from there. So if you go to the green and look backwards, and I wrote a piece on this for Golf Illustrated years ago, going to be doing another piece for Golf Tips here next year about the same thing. If you look backwards at a hole, you'll get to understand what the architect's trying to have you do. So now all of a sudden, let's say you hate looking at right to left shots. You go ahead and play the hole, you're looking backwards, all of a sudden it becomes a left to right backwards, and you get to understand where everything that was in your eye that was making you feel visually uncomfortable most likely has disappeared. Bunkers, hazards, trees that are poking out in the middle. And from there, you can now shorten the golf course is the term I use. When someone's just really chomping at the bit saying, I don't like this hole, I'm trying to get them to focus on shorter targets and not just on the hole itself, and play a game within a game to something that they like. Again, going back to a right to left or left to right shot shape, if you're really wanting to play that right to left shot shape, yet you can't hit the fade, and that's what the course requires for that particular hole, what's that target out in the middle of the fairway that you can hit a right to left shot to? Once you've done that, and in particular, I see it more off the tee than, say, fairway to the green. The better players, you see a little bit more fairway to green. And even then, we're trying to shorten it up, trying to have them focus on smaller things, not bigger things, because that's the way your eyes and your brain are hardwired to see and focus on smaller targets. So if the pin's in the wrong place for them visually, I try to have them imagine another target on another part of the green that better fits their eye, better fits the shape of their constant ball flight. And it makes things easier. Even for the high handicapper, it makes things easier because now you're making, say, a par 4 or par 5, 4 or 5 different compartments of the hole versus the entire hole itself. From a mental standpoint, it makes it easier. From a visual standpoint, all of a sudden it becomes a little bit more comfortable. And then from a confidence level, if you string a couple of shots together, you look backwards and see that you did it based on how the architect wants you to play the hole. It doesn't become an easier game. It becomes an easier game for you to understand based on the strengths that you have and the envisionment of your shots that you want to see consistently.
Right. Well put together. Pete, Nicholas, as I mentioned, often referred to certain holes or even golf courses that didn't fit his eye. And I remember him years ago, one of the comments he made, and again, I'm just, paraphrasing here, but essentially what he said was he didn't try to, obviously he was a fader of the ball, and that was his sort of go-to shot. But if he came upon a hole that just didn't really look good to him, he didn't try to be too aggressive. He'd be happy if he got out of there with the par, and if anything better than that, obviously that was a bonus. But he didn't try to do anything fancy. Is that kind of along the same advice? I mean, obviously I'm sure you could pick up on a lot of John's points and agree with as well. But is that kind of the thinking as well that you have, is that don't try to, if a hole or course doesn't fit well, don't try to be too aggressive on it?
Well, absolutely. I can tell you one specific player that I have that every time he tries to shape a tee ball, many times he said, your eye has to see straight. If the hole curves, hit it straight to the corner and then play. It's one of those things that you have to be able to understand your limitations and know what fits your game and what doesn't fit your game. When I was growing up as a kid, I hooked everything. So if the hole went left or right, I just stood there on the tee and scratched my head. How do I play this? Because every ball I hit goes away from the hole. So, you have to understand, what you're doing and then, try to it. And I think it goes back to getting prepared. I mean, Nicholas, Tiger Woods, they were so much better prepared to play the golf courses that they played than anybody else was because they knew what the course entailed. They knew what their limitations were, and they knew what best to do so that they could adapt their game to that golf course. And, and in some cases, it doesn't work. Trevino was one that didn't like the Masters because it didn't fit his eye. It didn't fit his game. He said, I just never played well there because it didn't fit what I was trying to do. But I think in the end, you always have to, put the game plan together and then, understand, what your limitations are. And I think everybody knows what they are. I've always said, a sure double bogey is when you stand on the tee and said, hey, I heard this on, or I saw this on TV, I'm going to try it. Yeah, that's a good chance for a double bogey, trying something you're not used to. But, you have to play the things you can play. If you hit a fade and that's what you do, and then after, 12 fades, you're going to then draw one on the next hole, you're probably going to be in for some trouble. So play with what you have, and you can score with what you have. That's the one thing that I try to get people to understand is I can take them out to the golf course without giving them 1 ounce of swing work and help them score better. Just with what they have, by looking at the golf course and fitting it to them.
Right, and guys, and I'll sort of open this up to either one that wants to jump in on this, but, something that I'd like to see sort of a resurgence, and I know that there are still some out there, but they seem to be further and fewer between. I used to like some of the old executive, what they used to refer to, or I refer to as executive courses, and I know there are still some out there, but what we're seeing now, or have been for the last decade or so, is a lot of these monster courses that were just extremely long, and I would love to see more executive courses out there and allow people to go and really work on their game there before they get out. And the reason why I say this is, you're pretty much dealing with obviously all par threes in most cases, are very, very short, and I mean very short par four if there is a few on there. But it really caused people to focus on the shorter aspects of their game, and it was easier and more attainable to make a par. And I think because a lot of people get out there and they get on these holes that are 500 and whatever the case is, even if it's a par five, and they're so long and they just don't have the game for it. And they're struggling out there, and I think it just sort of deflates their ego, number one, but also they just don't have the ability on some of these longer courses, and I think that this would be a good way to maybe help build some confidence. Any thoughts to that, guys? Maybe having more executive courses, and I think it would also be more fun for entry-level players that maybe haven't played a lot of golf to start out on an executive-type course.
Totally agree, and I'm going to hit this. I'm going to hit this three-pronged. I'm very fortunate that I served the members of North Florida as an officer, and because of that, I go to the annual meetings of the PGA. And this year, Jack Nicklaus was our keynote, and he basically said, "You know what? We have outdistanced the game." To sort of paraphrase what he said there, that between the ball and people absolutely insisting on courses being 7,000 yards, we're baking people out of the game, literally. They get so heated, so frustrated that people just leave. Whereas when he was a kid, when he was brought up, Scioto wasn't very long. It's been renovated a couple of times to get to 7,000, but that's what you started on. And there's tons of great places like that. There's a famous theme park where I am that has a 9-hole executive course that's absolutely wonderful to play, that I recommend to my absolute beginners to go play all the time. I had a golf school during Thanksgiving with an older gentleman who's just now taken up the game. We played the forward tees. He absolutely loved it. If I had brought him back to where his buddies want him to play, it would have been like pulling what few hairs he had out of his head. There's a great friend of mine, Mick Potter, who's the women's coach at Alabama. I met him when he was the men's and women's at Furman, and he used to bring the teams over to the course where I was employed, and he'd have the men play the forward tees in preparation for tournaments. And he would change the par, but he'd place emphasis on the scoring, exactly what you're talking about, Ted. So, the three different phases of this are whether you're a beginner or an absolute fantastic player, playing those forwards tees can not only be fun, it can be a challenge based on how you go about preparing your mind for that challenge, number one. Number two, play the tees that are built for you. And don't buy into the marketing of you got to hit something 300 yards. How many people can really do that? Let's be realistic.
Right.
Let's be realistic with your skill level and put yourself on those tees that make sense for you, that you can have fun. And number three, you don't have to play the back tees because everybody's cajoling you into it. Go play the tees where you're competitive. That's why there's a handicap system. That's why you take your index and apply it to a chart at the golf course so you can make a fair game. There were seniors at this private club that I'm talking about. They'd have fits because they were playing the forward tee, yet they were giving strokes to the guy playing the back tee. Yes, it's a much tougher golf course, but move even more forward. You can give this guy enough strokes and move him back enough where it's an even game. At the end of the day, you're going to be within 2 or 3 strokes of each other. I've always lived by this. You've heard me say this before. I have fun or I change what I do, and this is a perfect example of it. Change the tees. Play the tees that best represent your skill level where you can have the most fun.
You're exactly right. And Pete, I'm going to obviously get you to chime in here in just a second. But, I had a conversation with a gentleman the other day, about 2 days ago, and we were talking about this very thing. And he said, and he's 72, still pretty fit. And, he was a former bodybuilder. And so he's still got a pretty good frame on him. But he said, he obviously has some back issues and things like that. And he just said, I can't hit it as far as I used to. And he said that, you get on some of these golf courses, especially, he comes down here to Florida. And, as John pointed out, some of these courses, 7,000 plus yards. And, he can certainly move up on the tees and that, but they're still very, very challenging. And I said to him, you need to get out there and find some shorter courses. Number one, if you're finding the courses that you have been playing are just too challenging, but he said he remembered the same thing as I do, is playing when he was younger on some of these executive courses, and he had just as much fun as he did playing some of the resort courses. And again, we're not trying to knock the some of the resort courses and that, but they are, as you pointed out, John and Pete, I'm sure you concur. It's causing a lot of people, or has caused a lot of people, to drop out because it's too hard for them. They just are not enjoying it. They're not having fun. Pete, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. We have a golf course just down the road from where I live, 18-hole regulation. There's a 9-hole par 3 course. The shortest hole's 80 yards and the longest one's 145. And sadly enough, there's not a lot of people on it. And it's one of the best places you could possibly go to work on your game, not only from a short game standpoint and scoring, but also from just learning how to be out there with those smaller holes. My daughter started playing this summer, and that's where we started. I took her out there. She had a blast out there. Just didn't feel so intimidated that, the holes are so long. And they get out on those long ones, and they hit 4 or 5 shots, and then just pick up their ball, and they get discouraged like you're talking about. So, I agree that, from a regular golf course standpoint, I've always told everybody, I always challenge the members when I was back home. I said, move up to the front tees and don't move back until you can shoot par. Stay up there. Right. You're equating it to a shorter golf course. I'm just trying to get you to, play better, move up. There's nothing wrong with moving up. I've always said, too, if a tour player came to this hole, they'd hit a driver and a 7-iron. Find a tee box where it's the same for you if you want to try to play like a tour player does.
Right, exactly.
And I know the distance factors out there, and everybody's talking about, in today's instruction, we fight it all the time. I want to hit it further. I want to hit it further. I want to hit it further. And I'm always saying, well, you're doing a pretty good job because you keep hitting it further away from the hole. So why don't we get it so it goes toward the hole first, and then we can work on something from there. But, to me, there's 2 indicators in the game of golf, what the ball does and what you shoot, what your score is. So start with the scoring shots. Get on those shorter golf courses. Find the par 3s. If you can play at a time of day when there's not many people out there, drive up to the 150-yard marker and play from there. Yeah. We always did that with our new players when I was with the golf school. We just drove down there and we started from 150 yards out just to give them an idea of being out there, getting comfortable, hitting shots, having some fun around the greens, start the scoring shots from putting and chipping and pitching, and then move backwards from there.
One of the things I'll add to what – go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead,
one of the things I was going to add to that, and I think Pete will agree with this, my game changed when I forgot about distance and was told make par on 3s and 5s, and the 4s will take care of themselves. And it took me a little while to figure that out. It took me a couple holes because I was just bullheaded. I was stubborn. And then realized, okay, I'm going to play the 3s where I can make a par. And I'm going to play the 5s where I know I can make a par. And then all of a sudden my scores just dropped like rocks, like lead bricks. And it does go hand in hand and parcel with tee box positions. You're trying to play a par 3 from 200 yards and can't make a par. Go back to what Pete said. It wasn't meant for you to hit hybrid to the pros are hitting 6-iron. Move up to a box where you can hit 6-iron and you have a good opportunity to make par. It's basically, I'm saying the same thing, but if you think about 3s and 5s as your par holes, not as birdie holes, just think of them as par holes, and let the par 4s take care of themselves, you'll be very surprised how quickly your score drops.
Oh yeah, you're exactly right. And just a final thought on that. One of the reasons I really enjoyed, and this is, I'm dating myself now, but probably going back about 30 years. A lot of my friends, of course, I played golf from a very early age, so I was a good player at the time, and still can hold my own, but I would play obviously most of the standard courses out there, and at that time. They only had basically 3 sets of tees. They had the men's, they had the ladies' tee, and then they had the championship tees. Now, you can go there, and I'm sure there's courses, I think, John, you probably concur, where you can actually get as many as 6 and even 7 variations of tee positions. But back then, you only had that. And a lot of my friends that were not golfers were very intimidated because, certainly, God forbid, they were going to not move up to the ladies' tee. But that even from the men's tee was a challenge for them. And so I remembered, there were a few executive courses around. So, I would corral them out there on a Sunday or a Saturday, and they had a blast because it was achievable for them. They just couldn't play some of the regular courses. They didn't play enough golf, but they enjoyed it on the executive courses. And, we used to go out there and make a regular weekend deal of it. And I had just as much fun as they did, even though I had an easier time with it. But they were feeling like they could be a little more competitive with me than on some of the regular courses, and they enjoyed it. Plus, it was cheaper for them too, which I'm sure had something to do with it. But I agree. I wish we would see more of that, because that's a complaint I get. Is a lot of golfers just say it's just too hard. They're frustrated. The courses are too tough. It's not just the distance, but there's other factors as well, which we can discuss another time. But final question, guys, before I let you split. I see we're running close to our time. And Pete, I'll let you tackle this one first, then John, just some thoughts on it. Is it important for a player, especially coming into a tournament, and this can be a professional or even a club championship, is it important to come out of the gate quickly, or should you pace yourself?
Oh, I think you should pace yourself and let the golf course come to you. When I used to warm up before a tournament, the last probably half a dozen to 10 shots I would hit was with the driver, so I could see if I could use it. If I can't find the range, when I'm warming up, I'm not going to find it on the first tee. So I would always try to ease myself into it. A lot of times I would take a par 4 starting hole and I'd split it in half and hit, and if it's 400, I'd hit 2 200-yard shots. Just to ease myself into the game and get going. So I think you should always, let it come to you. I mean, it's real easy if you birdie the first couple of holes or one under what you normally shoot on the first couple of holes to, start, oh man, I'm gonna, start pressing right away. But I think just let the golf course come to you. Get yourself ease into it, get relaxed, and I think you'll find you'll have an easier time scoring doing that instead of pressing right out of the gate.
Yeah, and obviously certain things I guess depend on the personality and the type. I mean, some people are very highly competitive and they want to get going right away, but others can be have a more slower pace to the game. John, what are your thoughts on that? Out of the gate quickly, or do you agree with Pete? Pacing yourself is a smarter play.
100% agree with Pete. A lot of times, if you're trying to sprint right out of the gate and you haven't prepared yourself long before the tournament day or whatever round, whether it's a tournament or not, you're just setting yourself up for disaster. You just got to let things come to you very organically. There are days you're going to hit driver fantastic and can't hit the broadside of a barn when it comes to a short iron. But then there's other days it's the opposite, and you just have to figure that puzzle out each and every time you play. Sometimes on every hole you have to figure it out. So if you've got an expectation that, okay, I can birdie the first 3 out of 5, let's talk about it not as an expectation. Let's talk about it as a task-oriented process. Let's complete a task and complete another, and, hey, if you make birdie, great. And if you don't, no big deal. You haven't hurt yourself. Allowing the game to come to you that way versus trying to force things. It never works when you try to force nature. Never. It comes back to bite you. And golf's no different. If you don't have to be conservative and lay up and bunt things down the fairway that way.
Right.
Play your game and just let the day come to you. Let the people you surround yourself with, whether by choice or not, let that happen. Let the atmosphere happen. Let your skills happen. You get into a better overall rhythm that way. And what you find is when you need to press the gas a little, maybe late in the round, it's easier to do because you've walked
right.
in there with zero expectation other than let's do what comes natural.
Yep. Well said. And I think the other thing I would add to it as well is, and I know, ultimately this is sort of the main thought here, but, play your game. Too often, you get guys in a group and, maybe you've got a golfer that, like you said, comes out of the gate, steps on the gas a little bit, and it's very, very common to see other players try to keep up pace with somebody else. You need to really focus on your game and not get distracted, but let them play their game. If they want to play more aggressive right from the gate, then that's how they want to play. And even if you fall a few strokes behind them, stick to your routine and stick to your game. Don't get, fall into that trap, because I think and I'm sure you probably both agree that once you start adapting to somebody else's game, then suddenly your game kind of falls by the wayside because you're not playing maybe necessarily to your strengths or handling the course the way that you would normally handle it. You're now dealing it in the same manner that person's playing. Would you agree with that, guys?
Agreed. Oh, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
On that note, guys, thank you for closing out the final Coach's Corner panel discussion of 2016. Appreciate, as always, your thoughts and input. Appreciate it.
Well, we certainly appreciate having you put this platform out there. I've said it before. I mean, it's a great thing to have, and it's a really cool thing that you're doing.
Well, I appreciate it.
I agree.
And just to thank you, John and Pete, and that's why I enjoy having you guys back so much, and I hope you'll be able to join in next year as well. And the schedule for those of you tuning in that have been on the show before, I'll say this to you as well. I'll be sending out the 2017 schedule for everybody to sign up for. So I hope, John and Pete, that you'll be able to jump in again aggressively next year. And just on a quick note, I was starting to tell you guys before we went live something that we'll be doing a little bit differently. We'll certainly have some of the great panel discussions that we've been having, but something I'm going to be adding into the mix throughout the months is we're going to have some special guest speakers that specialize in certain areas of the game, whether it be biomechanics or whether it be maybe people in the equipment side of golf or what have you, are going to be joining in the panel discussion with their special area of expertise to add a little different twist, a little different flavor to some of the discussions. So I think it'll be a great addition to the Coach's Corner discussions, and we're going to have some more player involvement and also some great amateur involvement as well. I've got some people lined up that want to come on and maybe have some help with their game. So we want to expand it a little bit for 2017. So I hope you guys can make it in the schedule next year. But in the meantime, again, John and Pete, thank you very much as always for helping me to put together a fantastic 2016. And I want to wish both of you and your families a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll be in touch soon.
All right. Thanks, Ted. Same to you and your family. You bet.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend and a happy holiday.
All right. Thanks, Ted.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. That was my very special guests on the Coach's Corner panel, John Hughes and Pete Buchanan, a couple of great guys, as I said, that have been on the show many, many times, and always enjoy their thoughts and input. And I think together between the two of them, I think they've got about 60 years of experience, which is a heck of a lot of experience to bring to the table. and that's why I value their input so greatly. And I want to thank I've got a few moments here before my next guest comes on to help close out the final year. I want to thank all of the panelists that have been on the Coach's Corner over the year. My good friend Clint Wright, Matthew Cook has been on the show, Chuck Evans, just a ton of them. I can't remember. I feel bad. I can't remember all of their names. I forgot to bring my list out, so I apologize if but those are certainly just a few of them that have been on the show over the last several years, but particularly on the Coach's Corner panel. So I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for jumping in and doing that every year. And as I said, the schedule will be coming out here in just a few weeks. I'll try to get it out to you before Christmas so that we can get the schedule together before the new year starts. And I'll announce the specific dates as well at that time on social media when we'll be bring the 2017 season to start. But in the meantime, let me bring on a very good friend of mine who I've had the pleasure of having on the show a number of times, and also had his father, who you all know, of course, on the show as well a few years back. My very good friend, Byron Casper. He's the director of golf at the Casper Golf Academy in San Diego, California, and, of course, son of the legendary Billy Casper. Let me bring him out here, and we're going to have a nice casual conversation to close out the show for 2016. So let me bring on my good friend. Good evening, Byron.
Good to be here, Ted.
Well, thank you for coming on Golf Talk Live on my final show for the season. And I can't think of a better way to end the year than having you on the show. And I just want to make a quick note. I did mention earlier, but unfortunately, Brandon Stooksbury, who is the director of golf at the Isle Hour Golf Club in Macon, Georgia, was supposed to join us as well, but unfortunately he was pulled away last minute and isn't going to be able to join us, which just means more time for you and I over the next hour to chat about some golf. And listen, based on our conversation on the phone last night and I guess about a week or so ago, we'll have no problem and you and I carrying the conversation. And
I totally agree. I think you and I can do that.
Yeah, let's talk about something. And I talked about earlier with the guys on the panel, on the Coach's Corner panel, a little bit about Tiger. I don't know how much of the tournament you caught. I know we had a discussion last night, and we certainly don't have time to get into everything. But one of the things I think that impressed me that I saw in this past weekend, and again, I didn't see the whole tournament, but was the fact that he just seemed to have a much better demeanor out on the golf course. John Hughes, who was on the show just a few moments ago, made the comment that he saw him smile a few times and kind of joking around out there. And we haven't seen that out of Tiger for a while. What of the tournament that you saw of him in it this weekend? What was your feeling on how he played, but also his overall demeanor? Did you notice anything that sort of struck your eye as well?
A couple things. I would say the first thing that struck my eye was watching his first round back. It was interesting to watch because it didn't take him very long to get back on stream. It was a little bit up and down, but you would have expected that from anybody. And he got his game back on stream very quickly. I would agree with what your colleague said, that there were quite a few moments when he looked like he was actually enjoying himself. And when was the last time that we saw Tiger enjoy himself on the golf course? It's been a while, unfortunately. Right. So I think that speaks very highly to his mental game and to the place that he probably is mentally right now, which is why it's a great time for him to come back. If he can keep the injuries at bay and he's in a good place mentally, then I see great things, for him over the next few years.
Right, exactly. And that's why, I mentioned earlier in the program, I think this time feels a little bit different. I've seen, obviously, Tiger was playing some fantastic golf, for many, many years. And then obviously, some things in his personal life changed that in, late 2009, early 2010, which, obviously we don't need to get into. Everybody knows about it. But when he tried to come back, I think, and that's, I think we discussed last night on the phone, I think he tried to come back too early, and you could just tell. And even I think it was the following year when he tried to come back, and before really some of the injuries started to happen, his mind just didn't seem to be there. He'd go out there and hit some great golf shots here and there, but you could just kind of tell by looking at him, he didn't look like he was really on the golf course. And this time here, this past weekend, what I really noticed was he came and looked like he was ready to play, not just physically, but he looked mentally like he was refreshed and ready to play. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree. He did. He looked a little skinnier. Probably, I'm just taking a guess, but he's probably been doing more cardio than weights, because he did look like he trimmed down a little bit. Which I think, personally, is going to add to his flexibility, which he needs, as we all need as we get older. But yeah, I think he just looked happy. He looked, I would say he looked almost more happy than he did aggressive. And we've seen Tiger plenty of times being aggressive. But we just haven't seen a lot of that enjoying himself on the golf course again attitude. And I love seeing that. I think it's great for golf.
Yeah, and I think the focus, and I would use the word focus, because I know what you meant by aggressive, but when he would sort of zero in and really sink his claws, no pun intended, into the course and just in some cases blow the field away, I think that will if he feels that his game is back where he needs it to be, I think you're going to see him become more focused and more aggressive out in the golf course. And obviously, hopefully, the results will come with it. But I think for now, it's just good to see him out there. He looks healthy, as you said, and yes, he's certainly trimmed down a little bit here from the last time we saw him. But I think, as you said, I think it's probably. In fact, I remember somebody saying on the weekend that they were talking to one of the other players, and he was mentioning that he's not doing as much of a weight regimented workout routine as he did before, and I think that's why you're not seeing him as bulked up. So,
that's a great
kudos,
idea.
Yeah, kudos to him, and listen, in a few short weeks he's going to be 41 years old. So, and the other thing we talked about last night, which I think is good for all golfers, especially for those of us that are creeping up there in years. I know I'm a few years above you, Byron, but you're catching up pretty quick. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about and let you brag a little bit about what you've been doing here, because I know for two reasons. Number one, I think as we start to age, obviously our bodies change, and we have to, adapt, if you will, as we go along. You're doing some things now in your sort of workout and your routines and your daily life in preparation for being more competitive in tournament play that you're planning down the road. And I won't give all the details out. I'll let you give whatever you want. But talk a little bit about that. Why have you changed up some of the things that you're doing, and what are the benefits that you've been noticing?
Well, I used to think of having a bad injury. If you remember from previous shows, we've talked a little bit about that. But having hurt my pelvis, my left foot, and having major shoulder surgery. I used to look at it as a negative thing, when in reality, actually, it turned out to be a great thing, because I had to educate myself and on really what it takes to get back to not just playing golf, but playing competitively. And so it's really been a journey over the last 5 years. But this last year, as I'm getting closer to 50, I'm looking around and I'm seeing the talent that exists on the Champions Tour, the guys that are my age that are coming up, and they really have the same level of flexibility and same passion, that they had when they were younger, and I want to keep that up myself. And so what I've been doing is I've been researching and finding out very specific what athletes that are our age need to do in order to, again, stay flexible, stay fit. And it's a nice combination of cardio and small amounts of weights, and combining them And so what I've been doing 4 or 5 days a week for almost 3 months now is combining a little bit of weight training with running on the treadmill and doing, intervals, 10 minutes on and 10 minutes of some light lifting and stretching and yoga, and then again 10 minutes on again, and doing that for about 30, 40 minutes, again, 4 or 5 times a week, sometimes 50 minutes. And what I've found is that it really has enhanced every aspect of my game. I went out and played less than a week ago with another fellow golf pro who was actually on the Champions Tour. And I was really amazed at how strong I felt, Ted. And I think that's what we were talking about last night is, we have to do things that make us stronger mentally and physically. And, it doesn't mean you have to try super hard. It just means you have to try. And so I think what I've done is I've just found a nice place for me that isn't hitting the gym 5 days, 6 days a week, which I don't have time for. But it is doing, a good 45 minutes to an hour of cardio and light weights and yoga 5, 6 days a week, which I can fit in. And all I can say is take it from me, fellow golfers. If you're 40 or over, spend a month just trying to understand what it takes your body to be in its best shape. And you're going to see every aspect of your life improve, not just on the golf course, but every aspect, because that's what I've seen. So there you go.
Yeah, well said. And an interesting observation that you made last night in our conversation in discussing this, and I just want to go back to Tiger just real quick, and then we'll move on. But, something that you said that you noticed that earlier on when he was what I would say more bulked up, that you felt that it was actually impeding his golf swing a little bit, that he wasn't really getting into the positions he needed to be because, his body was, I guess, for lack of better terms, was kind of getting in the way compared to what he was when he first came out on tour, where he was a little bit longer and leaner. He was able to get into those positions. And I think that sometimes, especially for the guys out there that, do more weightlifting and things, I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing some weights, but if you get too bulked up, it's certainly not conducive for a good golf swing because it does, if you get too bulked up, you're going to lose some of that range of motion and flexibility. Is that an accurate statement, do you think?
I would say that's hugely accurate. But also I have to throw in this caveat because I have two friends in particular that if they're listening to this, they're going to be kicking my butt later on. Because they both are, one of them's a competitive bodybuilder, and I kid you not, at the age of 63,
wow.
He's kind of my idol because he looks like he's about 35 or 40. But in saying that, and they both play golf, and in saying that, they do have restricted movements when it comes to how far they're able to turn. And, of course, those big giant lats get in the way. And so, yeah, there's nothing wrong with hitting the gym or working out or lifting weights. That's something that a lot of people I know do. What I'm saying is very specifically that if you want to have the best golf swing that you personally can have, then you need to combine two things. Absolutely. You need to combine as much flexibility as you can get, some strength. It doesn't have to be a lot, but if you can find a way to combine those two for you personally, you're going to see enhancements in your golf game that you never dreamed possible.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Well said. Let me ask you something just in sort of preparation for getting out on the Champions Tour. Obviously, you're going to be working on a little of everything, but is there specific areas in your game based on how you're playing now that you're going to spend more time focusing on? And if so, why are you focusing on those specific areas? Are they deficiencies in your game that you're working on, or you just know that by working a little harder in these areas, it's going to pay dividends when you get out on tour?
It's interesting. I work, to answer your question simply, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail.
Sure.
I work on exactly what my father told me I needed to in our very last playing lesson at Hobble Creek Golf Course in Springville, Utah. And that day I couldn't have been more on. I probably wasn't 15 feet, 10 feet away from the pin all day long, but the one thing that I definitely needed to work on was specifically short around the green shots, and also putting. My dad being one of the greatest putters in the history of the game doesn't necessarily mean that's going to rub off. And so putting's very much something that I think everybody needs to work on, but that's a shortfall in my particular game. When you're trying to prepare for any competitive golf, but especially tour golf, as you know, Ted, it's very difficult when it comes to putting, because the greens that we play on when we're playing in professional events are always 2-3 times as fast as the greens you end up practicing on at your local courses. And so that's probably the more difficult thing to work on, other than just basic alignment and a nice smooth stroke. But I think overall preparing for anything, especially tournaments, and here's some good advice for every golfer, and that is, invest the time to understand within, let's say, 10 yards. If you're an average golfer, let's say a single-digit handicap, let's say 10 yards, and if you're a 15 or 20, let's say 20 yards. But just have an idea within 20 yards as to how far you're going to hit each one of your clubs. And take a little notebook with you and write them down so you can refer to it when you're out playing golf, because that really is the important thing. And that's what I've learned from leaving golf and coming back to it, that is the hardest part, is dialing myself in again to where it really is a matter of a foot or two as opposed to a few yards. And that's something that I think I'll be working on, along with fitness and my mental game, and putting, of course, over the next 18 months. So,
perfect. Now I want to ask you about going into tournament golf here for a second, and I'm going to ask from the viewer's perspective. And if you were advising a student or a friend that is going to a tournament, now I'm not referring to watching it on TV, because obviously with editing and that you can't see everything, but if you were going to take a friend or a student, let's say, that was going to watch a PGA or LPGA, whatever, doesn't matter what it is, event in your area, what would you want them to observe if you were going to use this as a learning opportunity? What could they learn from watching the pros? I mean, certainly following pros hole to hole can be fun, but if you wanted them to, would you have them hang around the greens more, or would you have them follow the full length of the hole, or what would you advise them if they wanted to get sort of the biggest bang for their buck as far as information and knowledge?
Well, it's interesting. I've actually done that on 2 different occasions, at the Masters and also at the Ryder Cup at the Belfry. In the early 2000s. I think it was 2002, if I'm not mistaken, or perhaps 3. It's there's so much that you can show somebody that doesn't have a lot of competitive experience and wants to learn. But what I would do, if it was a friend or a student that I was working with, is I would get them to the course early enough to be able to see the practice routines of the players that were going out that day. And I would have them watch very closely the difference between practicing on tournament days and practicing on non-tournament days. And really what they're trying to do with their bodies and their mental game in preparation for the round. And then what I would do is a mixture of what you had said. I would take them out and follow 1 or 2 groups very specifically for 9 holes. And I would try to find a player in those groups that had a similar body shape and similar swing style as my student or my friend. And I would go out and I'd follow them and maybe one other group for 9 holes with my friend, and we would pay real close attention to how they played the course. We wouldn't focus at this stage on the greens necessarily or the tee boxes, but really just how they went out and played the golf course, the mistakes they may have made, why they chose a specific club, or why they had to hit a specific shot out of the rough, and use the first 9 as a really kind of an overview of what it's like in competition. And then on the second 9, I would pick 2 holes. I would pick a par 5, and then I would also pick a par 3. And I would spend the rest of the time on either of those holes with my student or my friend. And I would be using those 2 holes specifically as examples as to what Dad used to call the playability of a golf course, why you make the decisions you make, and the reason behind it, because we're all curious. And I don't know about you, Ted, but somebody tells me to do something, I usually kind of want to know why. And so I find that explaining to people, you end up having these light bulb moments where they're like, oh, gosh, I didn't think about that. And I can give you a perfect example with regards to my father, Billy Casper. It's one of my favorite stories. And it was when he was playing in the U.S. Open, the year I believe he won. It was his first year he won. And he had to lay up every day on a par 3. And I say had to because in his mind, that was the smart play for him to be able to par that hole every day. He knew it wasn't a smart shot for him personally to try to get it on the green because it could put him in the back, and that would be an uncomfortable spot to get up and down in, or get up and down from. And so, how many pros do you ever see having to lay up on a par 3? I mean, that's unheard of, really. But he didn't think twice about it. He dissected that golf course in the best way that he knew how in order to play it at the lowest, with the lowest numbers. And he also won that year as well. And I think that's a great testament to me that sometimes dialing yourself back a little bit actually is going to give you more reward in the end.
And your dad was, of course, spot on with his assessment. What's interesting, Byron, and it kind of makes me think a little bit, and I certainly, there's a lot of fantastic players out on tour, but if you really look at the golfers over time that sort of stood out above everybody else, it wasn't because of their swing mechanics or necessarily having the perfect stroke. It was how they handled themselves out in the golf course, i.e. Nicklaus, Palmer, your father, of course, and even Trevino, and certainly many, many others of that generation. The problem that I see or have seen in maybe not so much in the last couple of years, but for a long time, was it became more of a power game. And we never really saw, with the exception of Tiger and maybe even Phil to some degree, and a couple of others here and there sprinkled in, but the majority of them, you never saw anybody dominating like you did in your father's era. You never really saw any leaders come out. There was always, somebody won a tournament this week and then you didn't hear of them again for, what have you. But now what's happening is you're not seeing, and everybody says, well, that's because they're all better playing in that. But I think what a lot of it is they're not doing, they're not laying up on a par 3 when it's not going to serve them well. They're not, do you understand what I'm getting at? They're not really, in my way of thinking it here, is they're not really thinking their way around the course as effectively as they did, I think, in your father's generation. Would you agree with that, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think maybe in my head, I think of it like this. They seem to have very aggressive swings in a lot of cases. And I don't see their ability to dial that back. In other words, you see a lot of guys nowadays, especially the young guys, that are, hitting a hard, full 60-degree, wedge that's been maybe open to 65 degrees, let's say. And they're going to hit that 65 to 75, 80 yards maybe, and they're going to be aggressive with that. Whereas, I think perhaps my generation maybe, or maybe it's just Dad rubbing off on me, depending on the shot, I'm more inclined to maybe pull out a 52-degree or even a pitching wedge and maybe hit a little three-quarter knockdown shot and have more control of the spin, and try to take maybe leak some of the speed off it a little bit, try to control it with feel. So I think perhaps it's generational when it comes to that. I think maybe just kids. If you think back 25 years ago, Ted, I'm sure you were the same as I am.
Yeah.
Perhaps a little bit more aggressive than we are now.
Right.
So I think probably very much part of it, but it also is, it's these these young guys that have had coaches, because we all know of coaches, even famous coaches that like the mentality of grab the club and hit it as hard as you can, and then you combine that with equipment and balls and the long drive aspect of which has always been a thing that guys need. We need to outdrive our friends, of course. And so, I think that it's just maybe a little bit more so with all those factors thrown in. But I think we were aggressive in our own way too, when we were young.
Sure. Would you say if you were to take today's game with swing coaches and mental gurus and every other trick in the bag, so to speak, and I know that's not a nice way to put it, but essentially that's what it is. If you were to take all of these individuals and put them back in, say, when your dad was playing, do you think that it would have worked well in his game, having that many voices in his head, so to speak? How do you think your dad would have handled it?
No, heavens no. In fact, I'm going to refer to another story that not a lot of people are going to remember this or even know this, but Joe Larson, I think, was there. My dad's and my partner at the Billy Casper Golf Academy that we started. But we were at actually Golf Tech when I was the acting manager and coach. Dad was there, and I decided that I wanted to put Dad on the equipment. And, kind of a dream come true, being able to throw Billy Casper on the technical equipment at Golf Tech, never mind being his son. And it turned out to be really fun. But during that time, there was a reporter there, and he asked him that exact question, Ted, so I know the answer.
Yeah.
And he said, my dad looked at him and he goes, if I had all those coaches, I'd probably have won maybe once. And then he chuckled and laughed. And, somebody who won 89 times just stated that if he had all those coaches and people running around in his head, he might win once. And I've always taken that on board because, I think there's some truth to that. I think that these guys, especially guys that rose to huge levels, Arnold and Jack and Dad and, Watson, Player, and these players that rose to these great heights, they didn't have all of these coaches, so they had to understand themselves. They had to understand their own games, what they were capable of doing, and so they didn't have a lot of those voices in their heads. And I think it was either a sink or swim, really. And,
right. I think probably. Yeah. I agree, and you're probably right. I think about the only voice that I would say that whole group probably had in their head was their spouse. That would be about the only voice I would say that they probably had, in their head at the time was listening to their spouse, and which was a good thing. But no, right, because really that's the only person.
And I'm not even married, and I'm saying that. So there you go.
But, really when you think about it, that because there was a different type of traveling. When golf professionals in your dad's era, when he was younger and that, they in many cases, before, the sort of the invention of traveling by airfare, a lot of them, drove to different locations and things like that. So a lot of times, the spouse would go along with them in many cases, or depending on the circumstances. But, that was really their sounding board. I know Nicholas says that, even though Barbara might be handling the kids and he would go off and play, that's really who he confided in, was his spouse. But now, they've got a panel discussion. Everybody's got their own opinion and theory. And to me, I'm sure there's a lot of good that comes out of it, but it's also got to be very confusing, I would think, for the player. Would you agree with that assessment as well?
I would, in fact, and I'm actually going to offer something because I was talking to my mother a couple days ago, and we had done a radio interview for the first time together during the Ryder Cup for a program. I think it was the First Tee or Pro Kids out of Salt Lake City, Utah, and ESPN. And so what I'm going to offer to you is that you invite me and my mom on your show at some point in 2017 to address that question directly. Because there's nothing like having a tour wife with 50-plus years experience on the tour to answer it. But in a nutshell, what I'll tell you is this, and that is my dad said the same thing in his biography that I'm sure Jack said and Arnold said as well, and Gary says, and that is that, their wives were everything. They were their cooks, their sounding boards, their mental coaches, their swing coaches, not so much, but they could certainly tell when something wasn't right. And they relied on one person as opposed to 10 people. And so I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I agree. And, I've heard, and you're exactly right. I've heard over the years, probably Nicholas most common, but I've heard him mention many, many times about some of the great things that Barbara did while he was playing. And obviously, again, Barbara addressed the family unit. That was, her role at that time. And obviously, didn't give Jack's necessarily swing advice, but certainly I'm sure when he had things that he was challenged with, I'm sure that she became a very effective sounding board for him over the years. Let me ask you another question here while we've got some time. And, I know that obviously your father, during tournaments where he might either been in the lead or close to the lead, and maybe things didn't pan out the way he did, how did he handle a loss? When he didn't, at the end of the day, when the tournament was over and he, just didn't come through and win that tournament, how did he handle that loss? What did he do to sort of reconcile with it, especially if he was close to getting the prize? What did he do to sort of handle that loss? And what could maybe our amateur golfers take away from that?
I guess I don't know the answer to that as much as I would if I was a little older, because he had won all of his majors on the regular tour before I was even born, and even though he did win a couple of the senior tour when I was out there actually with him on the tour, but I think he was like just anybody else in a competitive situation. I specifically remember being at Trial in Jamaica for a fun event they used to have. And I was caddying for Dad at the time, and it was a team event with the LPGA and the senior PGA playing. I think it was the top 10 from each of the tours paired together. And we had tied for the lead. In fact, we had tied and went into a playoff with a couple other of the teams. I think there was 2 other teams. And if I remember correctly, the LPGA player hit it out of bounds on the right, and my dad got up and basically duck hooked it into the pond on the left, and in a real sense knocked themselves out on the first hole. And I remember very specifically, because that was for a big paycheck. That was back in the mid to late 80s, where and it was a $500,000 paycheck, which that's a lot of money even nowadays, but back then that was staggering. And and I remember him just the same old, just you had to leave him alone. He had to mentally process what he did, learn anything from it that he could, and then release it. And, Dad was always really good at doing that. I think some of my siblings might argue that point, but the reason I say that he was really good at doing that was because he did it. He was able to do it, and even though there was a time frame, whether it be 2 hours after the round or 10 hours after the round, he always dealt with it, came back to reality, and got on with things. And again, sometimes that happens faster than others. And I think that that's probably the sign of great champions, is that even though things do get them down, because things get all of us down, I don't think they allow it to stay with them very long. I think they have a wonderful ability to release that to the universe or whatever their belief is, and then just get on with the business at hand.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you have to sort of decompress from the moment. Obviously, it's funny you mentioned that today when I was out driving around, and I was at a golf course not too far from where I live, and I wasn't playing, but I was going through the neighborhood there, and I came up alongside as I was getting ready to turn back on the highway, hole number 10, And there was a gentleman that was teeing off. So as I'm waiting for traffic to go by, I'm sort of watching him tee off. And I didn't actually, just because there were a couple of trees there, I didn't actually get to see, specifically what happened to the ball. But I remember as soon as he swung through, he obviously knew whatever it was that happened to him just was not good. And the next thing you know, the club was thumping on the ground, and he'd thrown it about 10 feet in front of him, and you could tell he was not a happy camper. So as I progressed down the road, I looked, because I was driving along the 10th hole, I looked over to see if I could see his ball, and of course I couldn't. So I don't know whether he sliced it, hooked it, or what he did, but it was interesting to see his immediate reaction to a bad shot. And the point I want to get out to the folks there is, you're going to have some bad shots out there, and certainly sometimes your initial reaction might be to thump that club down. But as you just pointed out with your father, there's a sort of a grieving period, if you will, and then you have to process it, learn from it, but move on. And I think a lot of amateurs and even some pros have difficulty doing that. Being able to move on, and especially our amateurs, you'll see them maybe play 2 or 3 bad holes strung together, and they're not able to let it go, and they drag it along with them like dead weight through the rest of their round. How do you help somebody like that? What do you do to help them sort of to move on, to not drag that with them throughout their rounds?
It's something that I've experienced myself, and so because I've experienced it myself, I'm an advocate for the importance of it. It's sometimes in this life that we lead and live, it really is sometimes really hard for us to let things go. And that's just not just on the golf course, that's just in life in general. And
right.
I think if you can learn to do that on the golf course, it's going to help you in the rest of your life. It certainly has me. But I would say 2 things. The first is, it's a game, and you have to, regardless of what game you're playing and to what level you're playing that game, you have to make sure that reality stays the same, that it is a game. It's something that you are perhaps even doing as a living or a profession, but it still is a game, something to be mastered. And, Ben Hogan, one of my heroes, I think my father's only hero, used to make the comment that, he might have 5 or 6 good shots in a round of golf. And this comes from one of the best swingers of the club in the history of the game. And he says he may have hit 5 or 6 shots. And so, again, it's all relative. What's a good shot to you? Is a good shot to you hitting it a foot from the hole? Or is a good shot to you getting it on the green? And
right.
Once you define that, and define that, I think, realistic, short-term or medium-term goal, then it's just a matter of realizing that you're not going to hit every shot exactly the way that you want. And so that, if there's a margin of error, you learn to deal with it. And the good players can do that shot by shot. The very, very decent players can do that every 2 or 3 holes. The players that have as much talent as anybody else, but you never see do anything great on the tour, are the players that have never been able to conquer that inside their own head. And so, again, if you can forget about your shot and go on to the next shot with a clear head, then that's great. Some people can't do that, and some people can only do that on a hole-by-hole basis. And I think it comes down to your own temperament and how willing you are to deal with, learning about yourself.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, Byron, I think one of the things that a lot of golfers, and again I'm referring to obviously our higher handicap golfers out there, is I think they've forgotten how to have fun out on the golf course. They've become too serious. They're trying to achieve that perfect swing. They've been, and I hate to. Would be one of the criticisms I would have of the industry as a whole. Is there's been a lot of obviously heavy marketing of that over the years in trying to help people get sort of the perfect swing and having the right equipment. And I think what's happened is it's had, in some cases, not every case, but a lot of cases, it's had a negative effect where it's created a a message, if you will, out there that I just can't do that. I just can't get to that level. I'm never going to be. And it's created a level of frustration with a lot of golfers out there because it's become too complicated. It's just too hard. We were talking about this earlier in the program with the guys in the panel, and I talked about, I would like to see more executive courses again. I mean, there's certainly some great ones around the country. I'm sure you have many out there in California. But, this was a great learning place, in my mind, was on some of these executive courses for especially the beginning golfers. It wasn't as intimidating. It was easier. You dealt with basically par threes in most cases. Sometimes you might have some very short par fours, but usually it was par threes, of course, in most of your executive courses. And, people had a sense of feeling like they could accomplish something, whereas, you get up to a lot of these courses now, Byron, where it's 7,000 plus yards, and even if you play the four tees, it's still difficult for a lot of amateur golfers out there. And I think that they've just, it adds to, hey, I'm just not having fun anymore. And that's something I think that we really need to bring back to the game. If they want to grow the game, that's the best way to do it. Let's have fun.
Well, I think let's have fun. And, I think there's a number of things that we can do to grow the game and to make it enjoyable again and to make it time efficient. I mean, I really do. Like, you've heard me say this before, but I would love for the USGA to look at 9 holes being not just applicable for your handicap, but, that they have a whole 9-hole program so that corporations and other groups can start having 9-hole golf days. Having, been in the management business for a couple of years now, as well as teaching, as you know, I manage golf courses and other properties for Pacific Hospitality Group here in San Diego. And having kind of learned the ins and outs of that business as well, it really is getting people to enjoy something that normally takes, 5-6 hours. If you have a corporate golf day or a tournament day, and you have a shotgun start at 10 in the morning, that is wiping your entire day out. So you have to have motivation to play in that. And if you have a corporate day that's 9 holes and you have a shotgun start at 9:30 in the morning and then lunch and prize giving, that benefits everybody. It benefits the golf course because they can have 2 tournaments a day. It benefits the company and corporations because they're only paying and hosting for half a day, which means that they're going to get a lot more patrons because people don't have to change their whole schedules around. And so, I think that there's a lot of things that we can do as an industry. I wish more people were talking about it, Ted. I really do, because it makes me sad to see golfers leaving the sport. It makes me sad to see golfers' handicaps not getting lower. It makes me sad to see golf courses being developed into other industries or homes. And I think the executive course idea is something that would, again, allow people to take their kids and friends and beginning golfers without any intimidation whatsoever, just fun. And we need to get back to that stage as an industry.
Yeah, I agree. And the reason why I wanted to focus a little bit on the executive course idea is just that I think there needs to be more of them. There's a lot of people that would love to get out there, but again, there's a cost factor. I'll give you a good example. There's the course I was talking about earlier. I'm not going to give out the specific name, but they've just sold off 2 of their holes, hole number 1 and I think hole number 10, to a large company in the area that's going to then flip it into some strip malls right out in front of the golf course, which is unfortunate because it's got some great views of the road, but now it's going to have a plaza there on each side. But it's under new ownership, and so there's a lot of other factors involved. But one of the things that they're doing is, and again, this is here in Florida, is they're getting away from some of the seasonally, what I call seasonal discount golf for a lot of your snowbirds that come down here, because the members are grumbling they can't get on the golf course. And I was there the other day on Sunday, actually giving a lesson, and somebody said to me that works there that that this is some of the changes that are happening, and I can just see down the road that they're going to phase all of these people that have come down here for years and years and years, and they're not saying they can't play golf, but they're not going to give them a better rate. They're going to pay the full rate, and they're using it as a deterrent to get people away for access for the members. But what I see happening down the road, and I'm sure you can attest to this, and it's certainly not in every case, but memberships are down in a lot of courses. And I think if they start taking that approach, eventually their memberships are going to get down to such a low number. But in the meantime, they've sort of ticked everybody off the golf course by not being flexible. And I see that, maybe I'm wrong, but I see that as not a good thing long term. What do you think about that?
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. I think that I think one of the reasons why we're in trouble, really, as an industry as well, is that we're not thinking far enough in advance. And for a good example is, and I'll pick on Topgolf here for a second, even though I love Topgolf. Yeah. I think they're awesome, and there's lots of groups that are like Topgolf. There's other groups doing similar things all over the country. But I would question whether or not that's good for golf, because that's not helping people get on golf courses. And and I think that's really what we need to do, is get people on golf courses. And I hope that Topgolf feeds people into golf courses more. But after managing 2 golf courses for almost 20 months now, I can tell you that, the industry is getting more difficult because we're not appealing to the younger golfers that we should have been all along. And this next generation of guys and girls in their 30s and in their 20s, and then the generation when they're young 20s and teens, what incentive do they have to go and play golf? We don't talk about it in business the same way it used to. In other words, deals aren't being done the same way they used to be done on the golf course. We're not offering this new, demographic anything that really is unique and targeted to them. We're just offering the same old country club lifestyle, brunch on Sunday, member guests and corporate events. We're going to have to do a lot in order to almost take it back a couple steps and rethink the way that we want to market the game of golf to the younger generations.
Right, and I agree. And I think one of the things, that particular generation gap, as you said, the 20s and 30-somethings, there's no doubt there's a pocket right now in the industry, and the only ones in that age group that is actually out there and enjoying golf are those that grew up in a competitive environment. In other words, their parents got them into golf at an early age as juniors, and of course they've gone up the ranks, and not necessarily that they're playing on tour, but they maybe played, some of them maybe played collegiate golf, others, continued on a tour life or what have you. But that generation just didn't have the same access to golf because it wasn't really being targeted that way. And
exactly. Absolutely.
Right, and
in fact, I'll tell you a quick.
I think I lost you, Byron. I don't know if you can still hear me or not, but I'm not sure if we lost you on the call or not, but or maybe we did. Byron, I'm sure you can hear me, so obviously I'll wait for you to call back in and let you finish that thought. But obviously we have to make some adjustments as far as how we we market this game, and I think that's really the point that Byron was getting ready to make. And here he is. Let me bring him back on. You left me midstream of your thought. Go ahead.
Sorry about that, Ted. I'm not sure. I really actually don't even know what happened, but I wasn't even touching the phone. But I apologize about that. I'm not sure how much you heard.
None. So go ahead.
What was the last thing we were talking about then?
We were talking about
for a minute or two.
Yeah, no. It was basically about that pocket of 20s and 30-somethings not really being marketed, and you were about to give us an example.
Oh yeah. So that's right. I was playing in a tournament at Del Mar Country Club, and I was playing very well that day and hit an amazing drive. A little bit of help with the downhill and downwind, and ended up hitting, I believe it was about 327 or 329 yards, which, quite frankly, at sea level for an old man, I will take that all day long. And I ended up coming in second for the long drive, and it was to a 26-year-old kid who we were sitting at the same table at the dinner that evening. And, he asked me why I was so happy. And I said, I never see kids your age playing in these events. And I said, if I'm going to lose to somebody, I don't mind losing to somebody 20 years younger than me, because this gives me hope in this next generation that actually cares about the game. I really, really believe it's that important, Ted. And again, I wish that more people were talking about it, because this is what we need to talk about as an industry. We need to figure out the best way to keep people excited and passionate about this wonderful game.
Yeah, I agree, and I think one of the and this is just my own observation, but I think one of the problems that the industry has had in they're going after the junior golfers and juniors out there, which is certainly a good thing. We want to expose people early to the game, but I think in the back of their mind, they're thinking, okay, let's funnel them into junior programs. Let's funnel them into, the next step, again, collegiate golf. So they're thinking from a tourist standpoint, as opposed to let's just go out there and have fun. And I think really the only way that we're going to get sort of these next generations is to really target what I consider family golf. In other words, let's get the families involved, because that generation now coming up that are just married and got young kids. They would love to do something as a family, and they're doing other activities. The problem with golf is it's so expensive that a family just can't do it together, so they're just not interested. I can grab a tennis racket for $15 and a sleeve of tennis balls for maybe another $5 or $6, and even if I have to get the whole family for under $100, I can get everybody up and we can go to the tennis court. But a golf outing for a family, it's not going to happen that cheap, and it's a harder sport to learn. So I think that's what the PGA of America and the USGA and all of these different bodies within the and even the PGA Tour and that need to start focusing at the family level and getting them interested as a group, because then when they travel and do things together, that's one of the activities they're going to be interested in doing. But it's got to be affordable, number one, and it's got to be something that they can do and have fun at and make it interesting, and not just and I think as the kids develop and get out there playing with, just like you did with your father when you were a youngster, many of them are going to grapple to golf, in their later years, whether it be for business or just fun. And that's why a lot of them aren't doing it now, because they're not exposed to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's we've actually instituted, or I instituted at our golf courses, a program, and we've test marketed it a little bit and seen success with it. And we'll eventually grow it a lot further. But I've called it Billy Casper's Kids on Course, because kids were very important to my father, and they're important to me, being a grandfather now myself. And and I want to see kids on the course. And so at both Salt Creek Golf Club as well as Warner Springs Golf Club, we've instituted this program, Billy Casper's Kids on Course, where every child 14 and under has the ability to get a free rental set and play a free round of 9 holes with an adult. We're doing that because we want the adults to be mentoring the kids. We also want them to have these small, short parts of, small amounts of time fun. And we think that 9 holes is a great template to start with. And so everybody, again, wins. The golf courses win because they're getting a paying adult. The adult wins because they get to introduce, their favorite grandson or son or daughter, nephew, what have you, to the game of golf. And, again, it's driving a new group of people into this sport. And I agree with a lot of what people are thinking, but I think if we start younger and we start with families like you're saying, then, we've got a jump start on 25 years from now, when we do need, a whole new set of golfers, and we can avoid some of the mistakes I think we've made with this next generation coming up.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound, as they used to refer to as a Debbie Downer, and say that, and apologize to any Debbies that might be listening to the program, but, I don't want to say that, the 20s and 30s something that we should just sort of wipe it clean and say forget about them. I think there's still a way that we can go after them, but I think that we have to find a way to appeal to their sense. I mean, everybody said, well, let's just get very technical and let's get all the technology out there because that's what they're all into, or social media, and that's great. There's a lot of great ways of getting to their attention. But there's a lot of youngsters that I call youngsters in that age group, the 20s and 30s, that probably would enjoy playing golf. But number one, they haven't been exposed to it at an earlier age, so they're not that familiar with it. And the only thing that they see is what they see on TV or social media, and that is, number one, they see guys like Rory and Tiger and all these others that are multimillionaires, and they say, well, this is a rich man's sport. So that's a deterrent right there. Number two, they see it's not an easy sport because these guys, geez, if Tiger's got 15 people like we talked about earlier surrounding him, I can't afford that. So they, in their mind, they think that that's what they've got to do. The other thing that's really hurt the golf industry, which has been good in some ways, is the fact that we've got so much free information coming over social media that it's making hard for the golf industry to come out and say, okay, well, I want to get you in here, but I'm going to charge you $50 or $100 or whatever it is. The kid just has to go to Google and look up golf instruction or what have you, and they get all kinds of free stuff. Some of it's good, some of it's not. And so we've kind of created a monster and a little bit of which has been a deterrent. And that's why they're not coming out to the golf course and to the lesson tee.
Well, it's kind of that old saying, too many chefs in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I have a policy. I do two things with my students that set me apart to the norm, which I'm very proud of, and I'll continue to always do them and include them in the academy. The Billy Casper Golf Academy, just to clarify your introduction earlier today, that is still based in southern Utah, and I'm still retaining ownership in that. The San Diego version of that is going to be called it is called the Billy Casper Golf School, San Diego, and so we're really excited about that. But the things that are really important that I think are my small way of giving back are really twofold. The first is that I video everything so that they have the ability to see where they started at and where they finished. In other words, how they were swinging the club when it wasn't working, as opposed to how they're swinging the club now when it is. And I make a record of that because I want them to be able to go and look at that on their phone or tablet anytime they have the chance or need to, in order to get a little refresher course. The second thing I do is, I don't ever want to give anybody the same lesson twice. And so I give them all of the tools in that particular lesson, whatever it is we're working on, hands or turn or weight shift or what have you. And I give them the tools so that they really shouldn't have to have that same lesson twice. They should have the ability to go over the information that we've worked on, look at the videos, look at my notes, and be able to fix what they were doing wrong. And and I've seen a lot of success with that because, one, it helps people enjoy the game a little bit more. Two, it doesn't make me feel like I'm trying to get one student to pay the mortgage, because unfortunately that's the mentality that a lot of pros have, is they want to make a ton of money off of one student, when in reality, if we're doing our jobs correctly and we're doing a good job, we should have 1,000 students waiting in line. And that's in my opinion anyway, that's how I want to make my income, from helping 1,000 people rather than helping 10 people for the rest of their lives. And I think, again, that's just, personal opinion, but that's something that I like to do through our golf academies and golf schools, because I really do believe that it's a mixture of giving back a little bit, understanding a way to make a good income and a good living as a golf pro, but at the same time, not just giving back in charities, but giving back to each individual student that you work with. Right. I agree wholeheartedly. Well, Byron, unfortunately, we're out of time and literally just have a moment left. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you for being part of my show this year and help me close out a successful 2016. And I'm definitely going to take you up on your offer to have you and your mother
honor us on the show, and we'll talk about that, of course, at a later point, and have you guys come on in the new year and have her answer that question that I asked earlier. But I also want to have you back on early. We didn't get a chance, and unfortunately, I don't have the time to do it today, but early in the new year, I'll have you back on, and I want to talk about, of course, coming up here in just a few months is your dad's tournament in San Diego. So we'll talk about that, give the dates, and those that maybe want to participate or want to be involved in some way can do that. So on that note, Byron, have a great holiday season, and I'll certainly be in touch with you before the year rounds out. And I want to thank you for all of your great hard work and your contributions to the show.
Well, thank you, Ted, and I also want to thank you for not only your contributions to your wonderful golf show, but speaking on behalf of the people that listen to you and also care about you, I'm grateful that there are people like you in the industry that are talking about things that need to be talked about, because I think knowledge is power, and the more of us that continue to talk and open up new creative ideas and ways to help the sport that we love, the better. So I applaud you for your efforts in that, and again, it was really my pleasure to be involved with your show this year. All
right. Well, I'm definitely going to have you back many times next year. We got some things that you and I are going to talk about and bring to the table in 2017. So again, thank you very much, and have a great holiday season with your family and friends, and I look forward to you joining me again in 2017.
Great. Thanks, Ted. Happy holidays to you and to everybody listening. Take care.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Byron. All right, good night. All right, I want to once again thank my very special guest, Byron Casper. He's the Director of Golf at the Casper Golf Academy, and just a great gentleman, and obviously is a chip off the old block, as they say. Of course, son of legendary Billy Casper, who also had been on the show a few years back and unfortunately is no longer with us, but certainly has left a tremendous legacy behind, and certainly an inspiration for all those new golfers coming out there to learn from. So again, thank you, Byron, for coming on the show, and I see that we're winding down very quickly here. So again, I also want to thank my Coach's Corner panel, John Hughes and Pete Buchanan, for joining me earlier this evening on the final Coach's Corner of 2016. And on behalf of those two, thanks for tuning in each and every week and participating in the Coach's Corner panel. To all of the other panelists over the year, we'll be coming out with a schedule here in just a few short weeks in preparation for next year, and got some new and exciting things that I'm going to be doing with the show. But on a final note, I want to thank all of the supporters and sponsors of the program, Mr. Jonathan Laird from South Coast Golf Guide. Go to southcoastgolfguide.com and check out a great publication that Jonathan has been pumping out there for over 20 years, and certainly has been a follower and supporter of the show. Meredith Kirk, of course, from Meredith Kirk Golf. Nikki and Tiffany Litherland, thank you for helping spread the word. Mr. Bernie Pinder from Ontic Golf, thank you as well for tuning in and sharing your thoughts over the years on the program. Sean Kelly, owner of linkedgolfers.com, and of course, Mr. Peter Doyle from Doyle Golf Solutions over in Ireland. Thank you, Peter, for all of your continued support. But particularly, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of my listeners worldwide for faithfully tuning into Golf Talk Live each and every week. And as I've said so many times, I have a great amount of pleasure and enjoyment of having a number of highly talented coaches, teacher professionals, authors, and entrepreneurs stop by. And it is truly through their participation and guest appearances that have helped to make Golf Talk Live a first-class show. So once again, on behalf of my guests this evening and myself, I want everybody to have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And Golf Talk Live will be returning middle of January. I don't have the date in front of me, but it'll be actually just before the PGA Merchandising Show, which is the third week. I think the 24th to the 27th, I believe, is the show in that range. And I'll be coming back live on air the week before. So it'll be somewhere around, I think, the 15th, if I'm not mistaken, 15th to 18th, in that range, whatever that Thursday is before the PGA Merchandising Show in January. But on that note, again, thank you very much. And next week on Tuesday, which is December 13th, Cindy Miller and I, of course, co-host the Women of Golf show every Tuesday morning from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the blogtalkradio.com network. That will be the final show for the Women of Golf next week for 2016, and we'll be starting up that same week in January as I do Golf Talk Live. So make sure you tune back in. And lots of great things that we're going to be doing, lots of great guests coming up in the new year. So again, thank you everybody for all of your participation in the program, and thank you particularly to the listeners for tuning in and all of your continued support through social media and elsewhere. Have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, everybody. Happy New Year, and God bless. Thank you, everybody.